Welcome back to the complete breakdown of every U.S. vehicle used in World War II. In Part 1, we covered tanks, tank destroyers, and self-propelled artillery. Now we're moving into the vehicles that kept armies mobile and supplied, half-tracks that carried infantry into battle, amphibious vehicles that stormed Pacific beaches, and the trucks that formed the logistical backbone of Allied victory. This is Part 2 of every U.S. vehicle used in World War II. Moving on to half-tracks. M2 half-track, shorter than the famous M3. The M2 was designed primarily as an artillery prime mover. Tracks in the rear and wheels in the front gave it excellent off-road capability, allowing it to haul guns and ammunition through mud that would trap a standard truck. Artillery units relied on it to keep their batteries mobile. The problem is limited passenger capacity. It was designed for towing, not troop transport, so it carried fewer soldiers than the M3. Why it was essential is logistics. Artillery had to move with the advancing army, and the M2 made that possible. It does the job. M3 half-track, the definitive armored personnel carrier of World War II. Tracks in the back, wheels in the front, and armor plating all around to protect infantry squads from shrapnel and small arms fire. The M3 carried mechanized infantry into battle, allowing them to keep pace with tanks and deploy directly into the fight without marching on foot for miles. Doctrine called for infantry to dismount and assault on foot, but the half-track got them to the battle zones safely. The limitation is armor thickness. It stopped rifle rounds and shell fragments, but not anti-tank rounds or large-caliber machine guns. Crews learned to stay behind the tanks when heavy fire came in. Still essential because mechanized warfare demanded mobile infantry. It works. M5 half-track, visually nearly identical to the M3, the M5 was produced by International Harvester instead of the original manufacturer. It featured a different engine and slightly rolled armor fenders, but functionally served the same role. Most M5s went to Allied nations through Lend-Lease, equipping British, Canadian, and Soviet mechanized units. The reality is industrial capacity. America produced so many half-tracks that multiple manufacturers built variations to meet demand. Why it mattered is logistics and supply. The Allies needed thousands of these vehicles, and standardization allowed for easy maintenance and parts sharing. It does the job. M9 half-track, International Harvester's version of the utility half-track, similar to the M5 but configured for cargo and towing rather than troop transport. Widely exported to Allied nations, it proved that American industrial capacity could supply the entire free world with mechanized vehicles. The British, Canadians, Free French, and Soviets all operated M9s in various roles. The limitation is the same as all half-tracks. Light armor and open top meant vulnerability to air bursts and heavy weapons, still critical because everyone needed mobile logistics. It works. Continuing with amphibious vehicles, M29 Weasel, originally designed for a covert mission into snowy Norway that never happened. The Weasel became a fully tracked amphibious cargo carrier that could traverse deep mud, snow, and swamps that stopped everything else. Its tracks worked like paddles in water, and the sealed hull kept it afloat. Engineers used it to haul supplies across rivers and swamps in the Pacific and European theaters. The problem is payload. It was small, so it couldn't carry much compared to larger vehicles. Why it stayed in service is versatility. When terrain became impassable for trucks, the Weasel kept moving. It works. LVT-1 Alligator, the first of the landing vehicle tracked series, using paddle-like tracks to swim through water and crawl up beaches. It was the key to unlocking the Pacific Island hopping campaign. Marines could load into an LVT at the transport ship, ride it across the lagoon, and roll directly onto the beach without transferring to smaller boats. The tracks propelled it through water and provided mobility on land once it hit the shore. The limitation is speed and armor. It was slow in water and vulnerable to beach defenses. Marines called it a death trap when Japanese gunners had clear fields of fire. Still essential because amphibious assaults required a way to get troops from ship to shore under fire. Dangerous, but necessary. LVT-2 Water Buffalo, an improved version of the Alligator with better suspension for hard ground. The water buffalo became the workhorse of the Marines, ferrying supplies from ship to shore under heavy fire during every major Pacific landing. It could carry cargo, ammunition, and wounded back to the ships after delivering troops forward. The reality is logistics. Amphibious assaults required constant resupply, and the water buffalo kept the flow moving even when beaches were under fire. The problem is still armor and speed. Japanese defenders targeted them, and losses were heavy. Why it dominated anyway is necessity. Nothing else could do the job. It works. LVT-4, a massive improvement in amphibious design. Engineers moved the engine forward and added a large rear ramp, allowing troops and jeeps to exit directly onto the beach under cover, rather than climbing over the tall sides while exposed. The ramp made loading and unloading faster and safer, reducing casualties during the critical moments of a beach assault. The limitation is mechanical complexity. More moving parts meant more maintenance, especially in saltwater environments. Still the preferred variant because the rear ramp saved lives. It does the job. LVT-1, an Amtrak with teeth. This variant mounted a 37mm turret from a light tank, effectively turning the landing craft into an amphibious tank hunter. It could provide fire support during the first wave of an amphibious assault, suppressing beach defenses, while infantry carrying LVTs followed behind. The gun could knock out pillboxes and light fortifications. The problem is the same as all LVTs, slow and vulnerable in water, and the light armor didn't protect against heavy weapons. Why Marines wanted it is immediate fire support. When the first wave hit the beach, they needed something shooting back at the defenders. Dangerous work, but effective. LVT-4, recognizing the need for bigger firepower, the LVT-4 swapped the 37mm gun for a 75mm howitzer turret. It acted as floating artillery, blasting beach defenses at point-blank range during the approach and continuing to provide fire support after landing. The 75mm could demolish bunkers and fortifications that the smaller 37mm couldn't touch. The limitation is recoil. Firing the big gun in water required careful aim, and the vehicle rocked from each shot. Still deployed because heavy firepower on the first wave made all the difference. It works. DUKEW, pronounced duck. This was a masterpiece of logistics. Engineers took a standard 6-wheel drive GMC truck and encased it in a boat hull, creating an amphibious cargo hauler. It could ferry supplies directly from a transport ship to a depot miles inland without ever stopping to unload. Music. The concept revolutionized amphibious operations. Instead of unloading cargo onto beaches where it piled up and became a target, Duke Ws drove straight through to supply points. The problem is load limits and rough water. Heavy seas swamped them, and the payload was limited compared to landing craft. Why it revolutionized logistics is efficiency. It cut out multiple handling steps and kept supplies moving. It works. Moving on to trucks and prime movers. Willys MB and Ford GPW. The Jeep, General Eisenhower listed it as one of the 3 tools that won the war. Small, rugged, and capable of going absolutely anywhere, it became the universal symbol of American liberation. It hauled officers, towed light guns, carried supplies, evacuated wounded, mounted machine guns, and scouted enemy positions. Crews could fix it with basic tools, and spare parts were everywhere. The limitation is payload. It was small, so it couldn't carry much compared to larger trucks. Why it dominated is versatility and reliability. Every unit needed Jeeps, and they never seemed to break. It works. Dodge WC series. The Beep, or Big Jeep. Dodge 3/4-ton trucks served as weapons carriers, ambulances, command cars, and general-purpose haulers. When a Jeep was too small, but a full truck was overkill, the Dodge filled the gap. It could tow light artillery, carry a squad with equipment, or mount communications gear for field headquarters. The problem is off-road performance. While better than a standard truck, it wasn't as nimble as a Jeep in rough terrain. Still essential, because armies needed a mid-size utility vehicle. It does the job. Chevrolet G506, the 1.5-ton Chevy. Often overshadowed by larger trucks, the G506 was a critical logistical link, hauling troops and towing artillery in every theater. It even served with Soviet forces via Lend-Lease, earning praise for reliability in the brutal Russian winter. The six-wheel drive configuration provided excellent traction in mud and snow. The limitation is payload. Heavier loads required bigger trucks. Why it mattered is numbers. Tens of thousands were built, creating a steady supply line. It works. GMC CCKW, the deuce and a half, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, the legendary supply convoy that kept Patton's army racing across France. Over 500,000 of these trucks were built, creating an endless river of supplies that fueled the Allied advance. The six-wheel drive CCKW could haul cargo, tow guns, or carry troops in almost any terrain. It was the logistical lifeline of the European campaign. The problem is fuel consumption and maintenance. The inline-six engine needed constant care, and supply units worked around the clock to keep them running. Why it dominated is scale. No other truck matched its production numbers or versatility. It works. M4 high-speed tractor. When artillery became too heavy for wheeled trucks, the M4 high-speed tractor took over. Fully tracked, it could drag heavy anti-aircraft guns and field artillery through mud, sand, and snow that stopped everything else. Artillery units depended on it to keep their heaviest guns mobile. The limitation is speed. Despite the name, tracked vehicles were slower on roads than trucks. Still essential because some guns required tracked prime movers. It does the job. Diamond T980-981, the heavyweight champion of recovery. This massive 12-ton truck was designed to haul tank transporter trailers, moving damaged or operational armor to where it was needed most. Tank tracks wore out quickly on hard roads, so the Diamond T transported them by trailer to preserve the tracks for combat. It could recover a knocked-out Sherman from the battlefield and haul it back to repair depots. The problem is size. It was too big for narrow European roads and required skilled drivers. Why it was critical is tank mobility. Armor needed transport, and this was the answer. It works. Now let's look at engineering and recovery vehicles. M32 Tank Recovery Vehicle. Essentially a Sherman with a fixed turret and a massive crane, the M32 braved the front lines to winch damaged tanks out of mud and tow them back to safety. Tank recovery crews operated under fire, racing to rescue disabled vehicles before the enemy could capture or destroy them. The crane could lift engines, remove damaged turrets, or pull a tank out of a ditch. The limitation is armor. While based on a Sherman, the fixed superstructure had weak points that enemy fire could exploit. Still critical because damaged tanks had to be recovered. Losing a tank permanently cost more than risking a recovery vehicle. It does the job. M1 Heavy Wrecker, a beast of a truck equipped with a heavy-duty crane and winches. The M1 was the mechanic's best friend, capable of lifting engines, righting overturned vehicles, and clearing wrecked trucks from supply routes. Logistics depended on keeping the roads open, and the wrecker ensured convoys could keep moving. The problem is weight. The crane and winch gear made it slow and cumbersome. Why it was essential is maintenance. Armies needed mobile repair capability, and the M1 provided it. It works, finishing off with liaison and staff vehicles. Harley-Davidson WLA, the Liberator, modified for military use with scabbards for submachine guns, ammunition pouches, and blackout lights. The WLA carried dispatch riders and military police through the chaotic traffic of war zones. Couriers raced messages between units when radios failed, or security demanded physical delivery. The limitation is exposure. Motorcycles offered no protection, and riders were vulnerable to everything. Still deployed because speed mattered. Urgent messages had to get through fast, and motorcycles were faster than trucks in congested areas. Dangerous, but necessary. Indian 741. While Harley took the spotlight, Indian motorcycles were vital players. Smaller and lighter than the WLA, thousands were produced and sent to British and Commonwealth forces. Dispatch riders kept communication lines open across vast distances. But the problem is mechanical reliability. They required constant maintenance in harsh conditions. Why they stayed in service is availability. Not enough Harleys existed to meet demand, so Indian filled the gap. It works. Ford's staff car. Based on standard civilian sedans, Ford's staff cars offered high-ranking officers a relatively comfortable ride between headquarters. Painted olive drab to blend in, they were unarmored and vulnerable, so they stayed far from the front lines. The limitation is protection. A staff car had no armor, so officers traveling near combat zones risked ambush or strafing. Still used because armies needed transportation for leadership. It does the job. Chevrolet staff car. The rival to the Ford, the Chevy staff car was a militarized version of the Master Deluxe. It ferried generals and VIPs across rear areas, serving as a reminder of civilian life amidst the machinery of war. The problem is the same as the Ford. No armor, no protection, purely for transport behind the lines. Why both existed is industrial capacity. Multiple manufacturers produced similar vehicles to meet demand. It works. And that's the complete breakdown of every major U.S. vehicle used in World War II. From the mighty Sherman to the humble Jeep, American industrial power created the tools that won the war. Which vehicle surprised you the most? Let me know in the comments. Subscribe for more military catalog breakdowns, and I'll see you in the next one.